Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Yes, we're back into Tonewood a little bit. I'm going to explain some things that haven't actually gone through in any video actually on Tonewood that I've ever seen, unless I've missed one or two somewhere, but I figured I'd cover it either way. So we've had a big fight over solid body electric guitars, and the majority of us seem to agree that Tonewood does not exist in solid body electric guitars, right? Well, there's some variables to that, okay? If your pickups are not potted pickups or wax-dipped pickups, so they're going to be microphonic if there's no coating on those wires or on the pickups, right? So you could talk into the pickup, you could hear yourself through your amp. Let's go to microphonic pickup. That's what we call it, is microphonic. There is an actual other technical name for it, but this means this is a kind of a pickup that can be in any guitar. Solid body, hollow body, and they are in solid bodies. I've had artist signature guitars that actually have unpotted pickups or unwaxed pickups, because the artist, that's how they get their sound, is with that kind of a pickup. And it's not necessarily about how many winds are on the pickup, why they went for it. It's the fact that to get the sound they're after, they don't want pickups that are wax coated. They want that feedback availability. They want the higher sensitivity of the pickup, and that's a great way to get it, is without having waxed pickups. So they tend to feed back. So as far as their tone goes, it's still got nothing to do with the actual wood that the guitar is made out of. All the wood is you get a higher end quality wood. Go from like mahogany to maple, or maple to babinga, or solid rosewood guitar. Okay, a lot of people set themselves up on the psychological mind trip of, oh, this is a darker sound because it's a darker wood, or a thicker, more dense wood, and it's kind of like, well, whatever. I mean, I just I look at, okay, if a guitar is made out of all rosewood, aka cocoa bolo if it's Mexican stuff, then you're going to pay like what, $10,000 for that guitar, where you get the exact same guitar made for you, that's made out of maple, or maybe it's made out of ash, and it's a lighter wood, right, in comparison to cocoa bolo. Cocoa bolo is very, very dense, very heavy, has a lot of oil in that wood too, which also adds to the weight. Has a beautiful smell to it though, but you're going to pay far less because it's a cheaper wood. So people think, well, cheaper woods means cheaper guitars, cheaper price. It's not a pro class guitar if it doesn't have this in it. And it's like, oh man, seriously, we really got to get over this stuff. But anyway, when it comes to generating the actual sound coming from your guitar to your amp, etc., and to your ears, where all that is controlled from is simply each note is in a different place on your fretboard, right? So obviously if we're on a G note, we get this. If we're on A, B, C, D, and of course E at the 12, okay? So where we fret the note determines the pitch of that note and what that note actually is, whether it's a sharp, flat, or etc., right? So now if I go back here and I fret on the 10th fret, that means that the string is physically touching the 10th fret. See, the in-between here, this part here, that's not the fret. The fret is the metal piece. That's your fret. So I'm going to fret the 10th, okay, which means I'm going to put my finger between the 9 and the 10, right? That in-between space. So this way I know that the string is contacting that. So now that becomes mute. But because we're fretting it, we have a space or a gap on the 11th. So that allows us to ring out our string. Okay? Now, wood can help in sustain, but a lot of that too, your sustain can also be controlled by how tight your grip is on the neck for the sustain coming off the neck. But that sustain is only going to be present from where you fret that note down toward the body. Now the body, of course, if your body is touching bare skin, it's more muted. If it's touching a leather jacket, which is like skin, the body is more muted, so you do have less sustain that could be produced from holding that note longer. Okay, so there is that does influence sustain, but it does not in any way influence the sound on a solid body guitar. Now, where you could see some influence would be every pickup has to go into a cavity, okay, unless it's a top-mounted pickup, okay, which would have no cavity. But regardless, the majority of the pickups, because they're all adjustable in height pretty much, they're mounted into pockets, and within that pocket is an airspace or just a cavity. Now with potted pickups, you can yell all you want at any volume, you shouldn't hear your voice coming through your amp. That means that that's a properly wax potted pickup. Okay, it was done properly, because you want to get rid of the microphonics to reduce the chances of feedback, especially at high volumes, and you're on stage, you're closer to your amp, so you don't want that feedback at that high volume, which is why the majority of artists out there, musicians, guitar players, use pickups that have wax coating to prevent that microphonic thing from happening. Now, there are a few artists out there, especially among heavy metal bands, that will actually use the same pickups, even the exact precise same pickups, but instead of being wax potted, okay, they're having them pure unadulterated, which means there's no coating whatsoever, zero. So this way the pickup becomes highly microphonic, so that even at lower sound volumes you could actually talk into that pickup and hear yourself through your amp. Now that cavity may have a small acoustic influence on the regenerated sound of the guitar, but that's only in that little cavity. That has nothing to do with the wood that the guitar is actually made out of. Even Martin themselves, companies have been making acoustic guitars for well over 200 years. Now they are the top authority when it comes to guitars in the world. And even they have said on their own YouTube video that, you know, people would be very shocked, you know, at the simple fact that even in an acoustic guitar, the woods we use to make the guitars out of have very little influence on the actual sound or tone of the guitar. You know, your strings that you choose for the gauge, for the type of material they're made out of, influences the sound of that guitar. Okay, which it does have influence even on an electric guitar. Okay, because your only points of contact for your string are between your bridge, okay, for your saddle, and that fretted note, right? So that note that's fretted, that's metal to metal on the string to the fret, okay? So we're talking here, this is metal to metal right here, okay? So, and you can bend that note, etc., right? But the only reason that note becomes that note is because the fret in front of it has that gap allowing the note to ring out, okay? Because if you were like this, well, now we're fretting the 11th fret, okay? So that's going to be a different note. We have a space in front. We have to. Otherwise, you'd have, you know, all your notes would be like dead notes fretted out. You'd have no sound, because every time you placed your finger anywhere on the fretboard, it would just put the entire string across all the metal tops on all the frets, and you would have no sound. This is why we need to have a certain amount of relief in a neck to allow this to happen so that it can lift up. This is why you have to be careful how low you put your action, so that when you fret your note, that you have enough of a space when you pick that note, that there's that free space on the actual front, okay, here, to allow the note to ring out. But what happens is this becomes a dead spot here when you fretted it, and your other dead spot is actually on your saddle. So the in-between area that runs free is what rings out and puts that sound through either your neck pickup or your bridge pickup, or if you're having both, right? So it doesn't matter if the fretboard is made out of maple, if it's made out of ash, it could be made out of, you know, plastic. Okay, the fretted notes are the fretted notes to the saddle, and that's all there is to it. Now, the type of pickups you use, the height of your pickups, the angle of the pickups, that does dictate sound quite a lot, okay? Other than the branding gauge of strings you use, a lighter gauge string will be thinner and quieter, where a heavier gauge can be a little bit more volumatic, but at the same time, more bassier response too. So less mid-range, less treble, more bass. Thinner strings tend to have a little bit more brightness to them, less volume. It kind of varies though too. I mean, and the material that the strings are made out of, even if you're in the same standard, 9 gauge or 10 gauge strings for your guitar, even if you change to a different type of string brand, okay, out of a different material even, or even the same brand in a different material, you will change the sound of your guitar just with that without changing anything else. So really, where is your sound and your tone controlled from? Well, exactly the same points we've already explained here. Microphonic pickups, there's only influence from the empty cavity area of when you're strumming, because sound is created here regardless. Okay, so that sound makes its way in here, because it's an audible thing. It'll make its way through all the little cracks and crevices around your pickup and into that cavity, and then that sound will be regenerated back up from the underside into the pickup. And because it would be an unpotted pickup, that amount of sound that's there influences the sound of those pickups, as well as your fretted note, what kind of tuning method you've used, whether it's standard tuning, drop D, or some other tuning method, whatever, it gets influenced there. But if you have potted pickups that are non-microphonic, then that cavity does nothing. It's just empty airspace that has no influence. And of course we have the wood as well. The wood is not influencing the sound. Wood can influence sustain, but you're only going to be, so if you're fretted here on the 10th, right, let's say, because that's where we're sitting with the camera here, then anything from, that and in behind the neck toward the headstop has no influence at all, not even for sustain, okay, because you're going to be dampening everything backwards, right? So it's everything from this forward point on. And again, if the body is touching your skin, it's touching a leather jacket, it's going to dampen it, it's going to reduce the amount of sustain that could be there than as if you just hovered it away from your body. You would get more sustain that way. And they do say, a lot of people argue, okay, well, what about the material that the bridge and the saddles are made out of? What about that? That does have some influence on sustain. Yes, it does. Okay, because, steel, actually, in my opinion, I think steel is a better material for sustain than, say, brass or bronze. But it kind of, there's a debate on that too, right? It kind of also has to do with, what density level of brass or bronze it is. So you've got like 660 bronze, etc., right? It could be an aluminum bridge or saddle. Now, aluminum has some interesting characteristics, one of which is doesn't have a long lifespan. So I wouldn't use it for saddle material. Maybe for a bridge, but not for the actual saddles themselves. I would use a different kind of metal for that. Hey, people use some crazy stuff over the centuries. Anything behind the bridge, like on our Gibson guitars, we have that tail stop, right? The back piece where we string our strings through. Does that have any effect over sustain? Well, that's kind of up for debate. Some people say it does. Some people just aren't entirely sure, and the rest of us say, well, technically, no, it doesn't have anything to do with sustain, but it does have a lot to do with break angle that we need to be concerned about, because we don't want the strings actually touching and digging into the back of our bridge, so we have to adjust our tail stop accordingly. And some people say, well, higher tail stop is going to make it play more slinky. Well, I guess there's a yes and no to that too. I guess it depends upon, how I don't know, too many things. You know, I mean, I personally, guys, I don't know everything, but I have messed around with the heights on the tail stops. And to be honest with you, I've not found a difference in how well I can bend a note or not. You know, but it's kind of still up for debate. There's still a lot of unknowns here for sure. But when it comes to the sound, yes, we do know that the sound definitely is from the top of that saddle to that fretted note. Those are your dead spots. In between is your live, and we need that live spot in between to create the sound from the string to go through the pickups, influence that sound. Angles of pickups, heights of pickups influence sound greatly. And of course the strings we talked about, your amplifier, the speakers in your amp make a huge difference. I've got a Marshall 15 watt stack, as you guys know. It's a mini stack. And you know, for some things I like the built-in speakers, but for other things, well, not built-in, they're separate cabs. But in other ways, I would like to have a stiffer, more rigid cone in each cab to tighten things up a little bit more, but that could go against me too. You know, that's the thing. You know, you can't just slap an any amp on any cab and, oh, this is perfect, because yeah, your speakers have a lot to do with your sound as well. So this is where we also can negate a lot of the Tonewood argument here on solid body guitars, you know, and a lot even on any guitar with a pickup, because your speakers reproduce sound. You know, it's not just your amp settings or your pedal settings or whatever, it's your speakers too are a big influence. So when it comes to the main guitar, it's pretty minimalistic of what is really controlling the sound here. So yes, you could go put a set of, you know, I don't know, Slash After Dark pickups in. You could put in 57 Classics. You could put in Pro Buckers, Burst Buckers. You can put in some, you know, death metal, whatever pickups. And you know, a lot of that is name tagging. But there is a lot of it where it is differences in the pickups. You know, because how many winds are on the pickup of the wire, and what type of magnets are being used, whether they're Alnico magnets, which can come in the form of each pole as a magnet, or you could have an actual Alnico bar down below, or you could have a ceramic magnet down below. These things all have a lot to do with the sound of those pickups, not just the windings, right? How many winds are on there, how thick the stack is on the bobbin, and so on, right? And pole positions, you know, if they're all flat versus staggered ups and downs. I mean, these all have their things, and you know, when you have staggered poles, you've got to be careful not to get too close on certain strings, because you'll create too much of a pull and you'll whack your intonation out. So then you got to sit there and compensate your intonation all over again for your new pickup configuration. So don't think you can get away with even flat, straight across pickups without having to screw with your intonation, because the closer you get or the further away you get with your pickups from wherever you intonate your guitar from changes the intonation on your guitar. So it's going to change your tuning capabilities, whether a note is solid or going wow, 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 wow on you as well. And yes, anyway, so I thought this would be a good little video for you guys, you know, and hopefully it answers a lot more questions about the whole Tonewood debate and where sound actually is generated or comes from in an electric guitar. But hollow body guitars are definitely influenced by their hollow body. And I'm talking about a hollow, not a semi. A semi has a block in the middle. A semi-hollow body guitar, it's a looks thing. It's got a center block, which means it's like a solid body in the middle, hollow fins on the outside that, yes, even though you can hear a vibrational sound, that sound has no influence on your pickups. Okay? But teach their own and believe as you choose. A full hollow body pickup generally will never have waxed potted pickups, because otherwise, yeah, you wouldn't get a whole lot of good tone out of that. But you could experiment. Maybe you might like potted pickups in a full hollow body guitar, but now your hollow body can't influence the sound of the pickups. You know, so it's not just about scale lengths, it's not just about strings and tuning or heights or anything. It has a lot of things to do with, and every case is an individual different case from case to case on the guitars. But this is a big thing here, because this is metal to metal here in order to create that note, and so on and so forth. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.